More peculiar events seemed to be occurring by the second, yet Evan barely had a chance to gain an understanding of them before something else irregular confronted him. Chapter 6. In small increments, he was inching closer to Evan. Evan pulled the garage door open, feeling agitated that he always had to fumble his way around the wall before his fingers found the light switch. The single 40-watt bulb situated at the front of the garage was barely adequate to illuminate the front of the room, leaving the back of his garage in darkness. He went over to the stolen car, climbed in, opened the glove box, and pulled out the car keys. One of his co-conspirators had fished them out from the owner's letterbox using an opened-up coat hanger, a trick which he had learned while watching a crime prevention documentary. As he began reversing, he noticed that the garage door was almost closed. He muttered something under his breath about being late and then went to reopen the door, making sure to open it all the way to the top this time. Once again, he started to reverse, and once again, the garage door had slid back down. He cursed and jumped out of the car, which, to add to his frustration, shuddered and then stalled, as though in defiance at objecting to being stolen in the first place. He began looking around the floor and on top of his cluttered workbench for something to wedge into the hinge levers that worked the door. He started thinking how the closing door could be some sort of an omen, somebody or something trying to warn him not to go on the burglary, to postpone it until another night or a more promising opportunity presented itself. "Don't start that nonsense again," he reprimanded his mind, which seemed to be working overtime on account of all the peculiar comings and goings which his day had consisted of. He then picked up an old garden trowel to wedge into the hinges. "You're talking as though there's an outside force at work," he told his busy mind. "A guardian angel or—" "Guardian angel," a voice talked over his. "Yes, I have to be honest and say that I've been described as a guardian angel on previous occasions." Evan flinched and recoiled from the voice. His right hand clutched the trowel like a dagger, as a warning gesture rather than a genuine threat should the intruder advance. Evan was managing quite well to keep his outstretched hand from shaking and dropping the trowel, considering how unsettled he was feeling at having to contend with a voice whose owner appeared to be unwilling to emerge from the darkness. Evan's eyes peered into the darkest corners of the garage in an attempt to seek out his antagonist. Only last week he had passed up the chance of some new batteries that were on offer in the supermarket in favour of a DVD which he had fancied watching. Now stuck with a useless torch on the workbench, he was regretting his impulse buy, which turned out to be a bit of a disappointment anyway. Once more the voice spoke to him. "You have nothing to fear from me. I am your friend, not your enemy," the voice tried to reassure the unnerved Evan. Evan's eyes searched his garage and wondered if the strangeness of the early evening was a continuation of the bizarreness of the afternoon. His day felt as though it was becoming more and more peculiar by the hour. Again the voice spoke to him, the tone of which told him that the threat of physical confrontation was unlikely. It did nothing, though, to explain how the owner of the voice came to be loitering somewhere in the back of his garage. "Put the trowel down. I'm your friend. I need to talk to you." Evan relaxed his grip on his trepidation, but kept a tight hold of the trowel, just in case he was misreading the tone of the voice or being misled as to the owner's intentions. Once more words were spoken from the darkness. and he tried to reassure him. "I need to talk to you, my friend. We spoke earlier. In the pub?" Evan stared in disbelief, backing into the workbench as the solitary drinker, who he had encountered earlier that day, emerged from the shadowy darkness of the garage. The trowel fell to the floor as Evan's hand now involuntarily released its grip. Evan's mind, which had been trying to come up with the answers to questions regarding the stranger's identity for the best part of 3 hours, was now ensnared in the mode of silence, and the murmurings and mutterings gradually allowed themselves the entitlement to be heard. Who how did you? Evan was too stunned to work out which question deserved priority, or to even form a complete question. He tried to make sense of the bewildering situation which he had become entangled in, but the harder he tried, the less it seemed to make sense. To make matters worse, his subconscious was occasionally reminding him that "you're going to be late." His conscious mind, though, couldn't help but feel as though speaking with the intruder had priority, and that being on time was of secondary importance. "Are they going to start without me altogether?" he pointed out to his deliberations. He finally managed to make the sought-after inquiry as to the identity of the figure and his intentions. "Who are you, and what do you want with me?" The intruder paused for a moment, knowing that he had to choose his moment before revealing his persona to a mortal. Evan looked at the trespasser, wondering if he had not posed his question clearly enough, so he repeated it. "Who are you, and what do you want?" Again the stranger deferred his answer. Evan was getting bored with the one-sided conversation, and had decided that he had more pressing business to attend to, rather than spending further time on this non-responsive amnesiac. He turned toward the car, let his intentions be known, but before he had a chance to move, he received his solicited reply. "I am Fate," answered the intruder, hoping that his reply would not sound too eccentric or just plain ridiculous to a mere mortal. "Fate?" echoed Evan, wondering just what sort of an unbalanced character he was dealing with in the privacy of his own garage. He then wondered if the person standing in front of him and moving closer, claiming to be some sort of a spiritual being, could be dangerous. He wished he was still holding the trowel, and he secretly searched the workbench behind his back. He hoped the stranger would perform the same disappearing act which he had executed in the pub. He never, and in small increments he was inching closer to heaven. Being unsure as to the intentions of the uninvited visitor, Evan decided that the more appropriate action would be to humour him rather than stab him with the screwdriver which he was now holding at the back of his leg. And there was of course the fact that this trespasser had managed to disappear through the pub's toilet wall earlier. Now, that had to be worth further investigation, decided Evan. After all, learning a skill like that could come in handy in Evan's line of work. So he asked a new acquaintance what the purpose of his arrival in Evan's life was all about. "I merely offer you guidance towards the most appropriate and ethical manner, a manner which will enable you to reach your full potential in all areas of your life." He looked at Evan to determine his level of skepticism, and then continued. "You know that feeling that you sometimes get inside, that instinctive feeling, or that voice you hear discussing your options? Well, that's me." On the one hand, Evan was unnerved by the strange eccentric still wearing his peculiar brand of clothing, making bizarre claims about who he was. Conversely, he felt intrigued by the whole performance that was unfolding in front of him, and could not help but want to hear the explanation involved. He continued to question the intruder, who referred to himself as Fate. Would you mind expanding on what it is that you do? What is your purpose for existing in my life? He asked, feeling as though Fate's first explanation had left him a little short-changed. I watch over you. I try to guide you in certain areas and steer you in specific directions. Sometimes, when it is deemed to be in your best interest, I interfere with and change the course of events which you have planned for yourself. Unfortunately, things do not always go according to my alternative plan. Why not? Asked Evan, still wondering how he had allowed himself to become entangled in such a hotspot of words which were presenting themselves as a conversation. Because most people spend the majority of their times doing what they want to do rather than doing what they should be doing, including you. This then weakens my ability to help you and guide you along the correct road towards a fulfilling and successful way of life, as opposed to drifting along the path of least resistance. Evan took offence at the inference that he was lazy, and began to tell Fate that he did not agree with what he was implying. Path of least resistance, he objected. Do you have any idea how much planning and... Fate interrupted. Obviously not enough. Jailbird. Evan's tolerance level was considering being replaced by the anger which his new acquaintance had begun to awaken in him. Fate, though, he did not care. Listen to me, you. There are two things that I need from you in order for this journey to work out. First, I need you to trust me, and most importantly, I need self-honesty from you. So quite simply, yes or no, is it easier to steal £30 than it is to earn it? Evan was caught between factual awareness and the ignorance of not understanding how Fate knew about the £30. And, Fate continued, if you are such an excellent planner, why have you been to prison? How many times is it now? Again, Fate continued without the need for a response, as they both knew the answer to the emotive rhetorical questions which were being thrown at Evan. Fate cut short his criticising comments after realising that it may be more productive to use honey as opposed to vinegar. So he mentioned to Evan that his visit was not about judging him. I am your friend, here to help you understand yourself and then offer you direction, guidance, and an alternative to the self-destructive option which usually guides you through your not very fulfilling life. Once more Fate checked Evan's level of scepticism and then continued. I can walk out of your life right now and you can continue with what you've got planned for tonight. Or you can allow me to change those aspects of your life which you constantly complain about to yourself. Help me? In what way? Evan asked his promissory benefactor. Fate considered what his most favourable reply should be, and then went with the all-in response. I would like to prevent you from spending any more of your life in prison. Evan admitted that he was tired of spending time in prison, and fed up of keeping company with the kind of people who he thought of as losers, who were totally to blame for his time in jail. If you do not like prison and its inmates, then why do you always volunteer to go there? Fate asked, tugging hard at Evan's emotions, as hard as he dare, for now. I don't volunteer, insisted Evan, feeling pretty annoyed at such an accusation. It just happens sometimes when I get caught or when someone grasses me up. Blaming someone else for the situation which you are in is refusing to face up to your own responsibilities and hold yourself accountable. You and you alone are responsible for the situations which you find yourself in. Although Evan was enjoying listening to Fate, there were some parts of the critique which made him admit to his own failings, which in turn made him wish that his new therapist was a little less probing. Then Fate hit him with the big one. You are the cause of all your effects. Fate waited, said nothing, just looked at Evan and waited. Evan looked towards the ceiling as the words echoed around his head. You are the cause of all your effects. You are the cause of all your effects. Fate waited some more. Nothing was forthcoming, so he expanded on his principle. All of the thoughts which you choose to think create all of the decisions which you make, and those decisions control your behaviour. Your decisions are the reason for everything which occurs in your life. Furthermore, the things you have done in your past shape the way your life is now, and the way you behave today, and of course tonight, will affect what happens to you tomorrow, next week, and all the weeks that follow. And so it will continue unless you change your behaviour patterns. Evan was up for discussing the observation which Fate had just put forward, when the word tonight tipped him a little reminder about his pre-arranged plans. I'm supposed to be meeting two of my friends at 7 o'clock, and it must be later than that already. Don't worry about time, Fate assured him. Whilst you are with me, the accuracy of time is dictated by a combination of the rate which it progresses for you and the pace at which it moves for me. As for friendship, I'm your friend, not those two I saw you with early in the pub. They are a waste of your time and energy, and they will encourage you toward your ultimate downfall. Fate could see that Evan had not taken on board his statement about time being dictated differently whilst he was with Fate, so he told Evan to take a look at his watch. He did, and to his astonishment, time had barely elapsed. It was only 6:50. Evan realised that something out of the ordinary was occurring with the passage of time. The watch he was wearing was an expensive quality timepiece, which had never gained nor lost even a minute in the 4 years which Evan had owned it. More peculiar events seemed to be occurring by the second, yet Evan barely had a chance to gain an understanding of them before something else irregular confronted him. All I ask of you is to give me a chance to give you a chance. To do what exactly? Asked Evan, becoming less concerned with meeting his work colleagues and more interested in what may be on offer from his new acquaintance. To shape your future by altering your past, was the irregular response from Fate, who then went so far as to increase the condition of his offer by adding an incentive. If at any time you no longer wish to be with me, tell me, and I will bring you back to where you are, right here, right now, on Saturday evening, minus 30 minutes, so you may still go out stealing with your companions, the other two thieves. Fate looked at Evan, didn't speak, never blinked, just looked expressionless and waited. As far as Fate was concerned, silence was a powerful way of putting pressure on the opposition when negotiating a deal. Evan looked at the entity before him, searching for a motive, looking for a reason to distrust him. Something about the entity he had now resigned to call Fate told him that he was right to trust him. Maybe the sincerity in his voice, but more than likely it was the fact that he did not appear to want anything from Evan other than honesty and trust. One thing that persuaded Evan was the idea of being with someone who seemed to materialise at will and was capable of manipulating time. Evan then resigned himself to the idea of trusting Fate. and so fate began to pave the way for the journey that now lay ahead.